Hello and welcome to episode 350 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. And Ian, it is the first time I'm home sitting in front of my actual microphone to record this podcast in a month, I think. That's nice.
Our listeners, thank you.
Yes, for this 350th episode, the A350 episode, for when you want a generic code and don't know if you're going to operate the 350-900 or want the big boy for the 1000. You'll figure it out later.
Absolutely. This is the extra wide episode, Jason.
Excellent.
I'm not sure what that means, but we're going to lean into it.
Well, it's an extra wide plane, apparently.
It is. We are recording on December 17th, which holds all sorts of significance for aviation history. We've got, starting with the first flight, December 17th, 1903, at Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. I absolutely love the naming of places. And I like that people went somewhere and said, this will be Kill Devil Hills.
And we're going to fly from the top of it.
Marking the first flight by the Wright Flyer, the first few flights only covering hundreds of feet and tens of seconds, and then working all the way up to, well, the A350, which can fly antipodal almost.
And everything in between.
We've come a long way. But Jason, did you know that December 17th is also the anniversary of the first flight of the DC-3?
Which you could often look back and say, wow, the DC-3 is 90 years old. Like, that's almost as old in the grand scheme of things as aviation is as a whole at this point.
The first flight of the DC-3 was 32 years after the first flight of an airplane, period.
And 32 years ago, if you were flying, you probably could have been doing that on an A320. I think there are 32-year-old A320s actually out there still flying right now, probably with Delta.
Somewhere around there. Absolutely. It's absolutely incredible. And the beautiful thing about the DC-3, I mean, it's an iconic airplane that has played a pivotal role, not in just aviation history, but in world history. I mean, the DC-3 is responsible, generally speaking, for the mass adoption of air travel, passenger air travel. And then just a few years later, they say, okay, we need a reliable airplane and we need lots of them because we're going to fight the first major air war. And so the DC-3 steps in, becomes the Dakota, becomes the Skytrain, and then leads the invasion of the Allied invasion of Normandy. Then it participates in the Berlin airlift throughout World War II. Before that, it's flying over the Himalayas. I just thinking about the things that this airplane has done in the past 90 years is just incredible. And then you fast forward to today when it's still being converted. DC-3s are still being converted to BT-67s and then used in the Arctic and Antarctic regions. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible, the versatility of the aircraft and the fact that 90 years later, it's still the best plane for the job.
It's still the thing. And you know what? I think I had dinner underneath one in a museum just the other day, and it looked just as old as everything else around it, but also it's still a very active and very required airplane in certain parts of the world.
It is both a museum piece and very in demand. Let's get to this week's news, of which there is plenty. We will go first to Venezuela, where late last week, two separate incidents called into stark relief the dangers of military aircraft operating without transponders on in commercial airspace. The first incident involved a JetBlue A320. The second incident involved a Falcon 900EX, both of which reported coming very close to presumably U.S. military aircraft likely tanker aircraft. At least that's what the JetBlue pilot reported, and that's what would make sense given the size and description of that particular aircraft, a 767 or 777 style. So it makes sense that we could be talking about a KC-46 tanker.
Yep.
In both cases, aircraft, the presumably military aircraft, were operating due regard without their transponders on. In the case of JetBlue, they stopped their climb for a brief moment before resuming their flight. The Falcon made some evasive maneuvers, not necessarily whether that was the aircraft was above them or to the side of them, unclear, but in both cases, the aircraft stopped doing what they were told to do by air traffic control and did something else for a brief moment because of a close encounter. That said, Curaçao knows that this is happening. And in the Curaçao FIR, there is a NOTAM that has been active since November 21st that advises aircraft operators to exercise extreme caution when operating to and from Curaçao while transiting the terminal airspace. There have been, quote, frequent pilot reports and primary radar indicates the presence of non-identified aircraft operations within the traffic management area.
Yeah, which presumably, I guess, the JetBlue pilots were eating here, and so are the private jet pilots here, where the JetBlue pilots and the other group of pilots as well saw what was ahead of them and took action to avoid any potential outcome that we don't want to end the year the same way we began the year, with a civilian aircraft versus a military aircraft that couldn't be seen by the civilian aircraft. So in this case, JetBlue pilots were not all that happy on frequency. They're quoted as saying they passed directly in our flight path. They don't have their transponder on. It's outrageous. And yeah, it's really hard to put any spin on that in any way. It is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous that the military is out there in controlled airspace without their transponders on, interfering with commercial flight paths in light of what happened just earlier this year. And to happen at least twice. We only know of 2 incidents because these were widely reported on, but apparently Curaçao knows there's others as well, which is very not good.
What's interesting to me here is that there are multiple U.S. military aircraft operating in that airspace with transponders on. They're trackable on Flight Radar 24.
And ADSB on, or at least MLAT. Like, we can see many of them.
Well, not ADSB. Yeah, Mode S. Yeah, exactly. So that's what's interesting to me here is that they, in this regard, do not have their transponders on. And that's certainly a choice that makes sense in certain circumstances. But if other aircraft are operating closer to Venezuela with their transponders on, why not these aircraft?
It's a great question. While I think it's important to differentiate here that these aircraft aren't just out there uncontrolled in all manners, doing whatever they want. They are under military control. The military knows exactly where these aircraft are. They have their own radar. They have their own aircraft surveilling the region. They know where everyone is every time, at every moment in time, which kind of raises the question of what the hell is happening here if civilian air traffic controllers are not aware of the military aircraft, but the military is aware of the position of military aircraft and presumably also commercial aircraft. Why do they keep letting their own aircraft conflict with commercial aircraft? It's just not adding up to me. It's not like earlier this year where you had a government helicopter flying a route in VFR airspace and kind of unfortunately conflicting with the commercial aviation flight path. This is a controlled flight. Somebody knows exactly where this aircraft is. It's presumably where it's supposed to be, but why are they letting it come so routinely at this point in conflict and so closely with commercial aircraft? That I just don't understand why this is happening.
Yeah. In the other airspace of the region, so moving over to the actual Venezuelan FIR, the U.S. has extended its security NOTAM that it issued, or revised and extended the security NOTAM that it previously issued. So this new NOTAM is now extended to February 19th and advises of a potentially hazardous situation in the Maiquetía FIR. It says that operators are advised to exercise caution when operating there at all altitudes due to the, quote, worsening security situation and heightened military activity in and around Venezuela. That said, U.S. aircraft have not been operating within Venezuelan airspace. The only change here is that it removes the mention of GPS jamming or GPS interference from any references here. So it changes it just to a military activity-based NOTAM alone. Yesterday, Copa suspended its flights to Caracas through at least January 15th, 2026. Jason, to me, that seems like a significant development because Copa, up until now, has been
the lifeline,
the main international carrier keeping things moving in and out of Caracas.
Yeah. Are there any international flights left out of Caracas that aren't operated by Venezuelan Airlines at this point? I don't think so.
I think we might be out of non-Venezuelan airlines.
Like you've got Avior Airlines, Laser Airlines, Conviasa. Is Conviasa even still operating long-haul flights?
Yes.
Maybe. Okay, so there's still some long-haul activity.
But they're Venezuelan.
They're Venezuelan, but yeah, I think that's their only actual long-haul link at this point, beyond maybe some neighboring Caribbean islands or, I don't know, Colombia, maybe. But yeah, let's just say we're recording this Wednesday, 5:25 p.m. This podcast could age very poorly by the time it releases in a day and a half time. We will see. We don't know. But yeah, the situation there is not good. And I'm sure a lot of other people in this industry are quite frankly quite pissed off that we are yet again in a situation where military aviation is putting commercial flights in jeopardy. And we've apparently learned nothing, which is fantastic.
Well, as of today, so Jason, I'm going to rearrange the show notes a little bit here so that we can stay on that topic. Today, it seems like we may have actually learned something.
On paper, at least.
On paper, at least. So what I'm talking about is, let's back up and talk about why this is important and being talked about again. Last week, in revealing the text of the National Defense Authorization Act, which is considered a must-pass bill to fund the U.S. Defense Department, among other things, one of the provisions included in the NDAA would have again allowed non-ADSB flights to operate in and around Washington, D.C. After the release of that text, National Transportation Safety Board Chair Jennifer Homendy took to the podium and made comments that left absolutely no room for interpretation or error in how upset she was that they would try and do this.
Dare I say she is doing exactly what the chair of the NTSB should be doing.
And so that was interesting.
Should we read the quote too?
Go for it.
I'm reading off an NPR transcript, and she starts off by saying, "It's a safety whitewash. If it sounds like I'm mad, I am mad. This is shameful. We should be working together in partnership to prevent the next accident, not inviting history to repeat itself by recreating the same conditions that were in place on January 29th. Yeah, she's pissed, and she has every right to be pissed off. She goes on to say, the committee leaders here defended the language in the bill, and I'm going to quote again, "We all care deeply and are fully committed to ensuring aviation safety," said U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, a Republican from Mississippi. He was apparently the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Kind of feels like empty words there if you're backing the language that undoes the progress made to have transponders or ADSB on for these military helicopter flights. I don't know. I'm just happy to see that Jennifer Homendy, if you're listening, and there's a possibility, thank you for speaking your mind and not being sheepish about this and really fighting for what you believe in, because fighting for what you believe in here is just such a no-brainer that it's upsetting that you even have to fight for it. But it's nice to see someone in government speak their mind and call out something that is so ridiculously stupid to try to prevent yet another tragedy.
And that seems among other things, to have been the push that the Senate needed. Today, the Senate unanimously passed the ROTOR Act. So this is the Rotorcraft Operations Transparency and Oversight Reform Act. It will now be sent to the House of Representatives for consideration. What this act does is says, hey, everything in the NDAA, no, we're not doing that. Here's what we're doing instead. We're going to implement things that are much safer. And this is something that the NTSB has been pushing for a long time. And a lot of it is some good common sense legislation. We've talked about the specifics, I think, when the ROTOR Act was introduced. Just to recap, it expands ADSB out and ADSB in implementation with a 2031 deadline for aircraft operators to equip with ADSB in for all commercial, military, and general aviation operators who are already required to have ADSB out. So this makes flying much safer because it provides pilots with much more information than they have without ADSB in. It also requires a comprehensive safety review of Washington National Airport, as well as all major mid-sized airports for how aircraft operate and how the airspace is set up to accommodate helicopter, UAVs, or first responder flights. How those flights impact commercial operations and to better structure the airspace so that they're not dealing with conflicts as often.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
The ROTOR Act also requires, there's a couple more that make some really good sense. New level of coordination and information sharing between the FAA and the DoD. So now each branch of the military with an aviation component has to come up with an understanding, basically a memorandum of understanding with the FAA to have a plan how they're going to work within the national airspace system.
Seems like the bare minimum. So
yeah. And the last one that I'm super excited about is it advances, providing funding and moves forward basically the new version of TCAS, so ACAS X. So that will be fitted eventually on more aircraft, be better at preventing mid-air collisions, and allows pilots to operate at lower altitude, or allows pilots to have a larger safety envelope at lower altitudes.
Yeah, we're going to have a whole podcast and conversation about that with someone who knows much more about it than we do, because how many times have we talked about TCAS being the savior of so many flights, and to have a system that is above and beyond and better than that and being mandated, that is just super good news.
Yep. So some good common sense stuff coming out of this after some very nonsensical proposed legislation from last week. Jason, you know how they say everybody has their price?
Yeah, I have my price.
Well, I bet yours might be a little lower than Lufthansa's, but nevertheless, Lufthansa has been given an offer it can't refuse by the United States Air Force for a pair of 747-8Is.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
The United States Air Force already has a pair of 747-8Is, and they came from the defunct airline Transaero, and we know they've been diligently working at Boeing for the better part of a lifetime to get those aircraft ready to be the new successors to Air Force One.
And those aircraft were announced last week that they will be delayed until 2028 now.
Sure, 2028, definitely going to happen. But another pair of 747s? But I am so confused because as far as I know, the current VC-25s, there's only two of them. There's a pair. There are not two pairs. There's one pair. Why does the Air Force want two pairs of this aircraft? And what's Lufthansa doing here?
Well, Lufthansa has the aircraft to spare. So setting aside this from...
Do they have aircraft to spare? Because that is a disputable statement.
Well, they have aircraft, period.
Okay. That makes... And that's where it comes back to them having a price.
Exactly. So let's set aside these particular aircraft for just a second and talk about the 747-8I generally speaking. The United States government has been searching for 747 747-8s anywhere it can get them.
There ain't that many out there.
Exactly. For both the VC-25B program and the E-4B replacements. So they sourced the E-4B replacements from Korean Air. When Korean Air said, yeah, we're mostly done with the 747-8s, you can have these. And so Sierra Nevada Corporation, or I think it might just be SNC now, because no one has an actual name anymore.
Oh, that's not cool enough. It's got to be Sierra Nevada forever and always.
So they are doing the retrofit on those. But the Air Force thinks about this and says, you know what? Maybe we need more airplanes. Not necessarily because we need more airplanes, but because they don't make those airplanes anymore, and we're eventually going to need spare parts. So here's what the Air Force told Aviation Week when asked about this, the purchase of the pair of aircraft from Lufthansa. Quote, as part of the presidential airlift acceleration efforts, the Air Force is procuring 2 aircraft to support training and spares for the 747-8 fleet. Given the 747-8I is no longer in active production and is a very different aircraft than the 747-200, it is important for the Air Force to establish an overall training and sustainment strategy for the future Air Force 747-8I fleet. So they need parts, Jason.
It's a death sentence for these airplanes, and I don't like it. They're too nice and too young, but I guess what is most surprising about this is that as of this very month, as of the December 2025 Lufthansa investor slide deck update.
That was a big deal.
This was not here. This is not announced. So this must have happened very, very recently and very, very suddenly, because Lufthansa kind of needs the 747-8I, because as we might recall, the 777X is still vaporware at this point. It does not exist as far as Lufthansa is concerned. It's very much in their fleet plan. But maybe it's next year, maybe it's the year after, maybe it never gets certified. Who knows? That's probably not likely. But Lufthansa needs this airplane. They're even refurbishing it to put Lufthansa's new Legris business class sort of.
In some parts.
Lower deck, but not the upper deck. Upper deck will come later.
That's a whole story. Whole different story.
Yeah, that one's all sorts of confusing. But there was no mention of drawing down the 747 fleet at all. There's plenty of mention for the A380 because it's quite literally a question mark next to the A380 on that slide deck.
Well, I mean, maybe that's less of a question mark now.
Yeah, or maybe Lufthansa just decided, we don't really need. How many aircraft do they have? It's 19, 18, something weird
19 747-8s.
How do they end up with 19 and not 20?
Well, they were going to take the first one. So they had an order for 20. They were going to take the first one. And that recently, very recently, finished retrofit for the government of Egypt. So that one was one of the early ones that ended up being similar with the A380s, where it ended up being much heavier.
So it was not a terrible teen, but a terrible
early
one. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You just got all the answers today, don't you?
Sometimes I anticipate the questions that you're going to ask and just have this knowledge at hand.
That's smart.
We've been doing this for 350 episodes.
Exactly 350. But yeah, it's interesting because the US government is essentially hoovering up literally any 747-8 it can get its hands on, except from one lonely last commercial operator of the type, and that would be Air China. I don't see that happen. You know what this potentially means, Ian? Our good friend John Walton might be really excited about this news because you can't just give away 2 long-haul wide-body aircraft from your fleet and just be fine. You need to have aircraft to backfill for that. And you know what aircraft is the perfect kind of cheap, already available aircraft that you already operate that you just can't quit even though you really want to? It'd be the A340-600, which may live as long as the DC-3 at this point.
It's just one of those aircraft that is there.
It's not in their fleet plan, as far as I can tell, but
it is now.
It's there through 2026, but maybe not anymore. Maybe that gets extended to 2027, or how long has the DC-3 been in service?
90 years? since it first flew, 90 years.
90 years? Okay. So 346, I don't know, 90 years.
It's got a ways to go.
The A340, yeah. But at this point, they just can't quit it.
Oh boy, wouldn't that be something?
I don't know if we'll be alive to experience that, but anything's possible.
At this point, I wouldn't be surprised. I just wouldn't be surprised. I am a little surprised that Spirit Airlines is still operating, given what
that's harsh.
we learned about over the weekend. So, first reported by John Ostrower and his team over at the Air Current was Spirit's competitors, or other airlines generally speaking in the US, were preparing for the possibility that Spirit Airlines would shut down over the weekend. This was because they were supposed to meet with their debtor in possession financing folks to gain access to another tranche of money to continue operating the airline.
And like, not a ton of money in the grand scheme of things. It was $100 million.
$100 million. Yeah.
In airline terms, it's not all that much. That's a lifeline amount of money.
But to get this money, they had to present a plan for continuing their operations, basically saying, here's what we're going to do with the money if you give it to us. And that didn't happen, but they got an extension. So they didn't necessarily have to present the plan when initially agreed, but the debtor in possession financing came through. That is keeping them going for now. They've also announced that their pilots and flight attendants have agreed to pay cuts. Those pay cuts will go through at least August of 2028, though who knows if the airline still exists by then. So Spirit says the revised contracts, they didn't give a number for the pilot contracts, but they said the flight attendant contract saves $15 million annually. That's all well and good, but Spirit might not be around for that much longer because there are now reports, Bloomberg is reporting this, among other news outlets, that Frontier and Spirit are seriously looking at another merger agreement.
No way.
Yeah, surprise. What is surprising is that the person running Frontier Airlines is not Barry Biffle anymore.
Yeah, quite surprisingly out of nowhere and quite quickly. I think it's by the end of the year, Barry Biffle is out of Frontier. He is
No. He's out now.
He's out now.
He's no longer CEO.
In an advisory capacity until the end of the year, which basically means sit in the corner and like don't talk to anyone. But or help the transition. I don't know, but this came out of absolutely nowhere and is it was the second of 3 major airline executive transitions as of late. First came Qatar Airways' CEO out, then Barry Biffle, and then as of just an hour ago, not even an hour ago, we learned that Delta's COO, I believe, is also very suddenly, very unexpectedly out of the company. So things come in threes, hopefully, maybe fours. I don't know. It'd be good for the next time we record. I don't care. But yeah, Barry Biffle out of Frontier. It's such a pivotal moment. Would love to know what happened there.
I mean, according to Frontier's 8K that they had to file,
it was because of no wrongdoing.
Not just no wrongdoing, but expected departure as the director of the company is not the result of any disagreement with the company or any matter relating to the company's operations, policies, or practices. So whatever happened fairly quickly, or at least the announcement seemed to come out of nowhere, but it had nothing to do with the business. So who knows?
I don't know. And that was the CCO at Delta, not COO, CCO, Glenn Howenstein, which is very surprising. But this news from Frontier, very confusing.
Yeah.
It's such a critical moment for the airline to possibly be on the cusp of absorbing their biggest, or not biggest, but most direct competitor. What happened there? We'll probably never know, but strange. Very, very, very strange.
So James Dempsey, the company's president, is now its interim CEO. And so we'll see if Mr. Dempsey has decided that Spirit is going to become part of Frontier. And we'll probably find out fairly soon.
I have a feeling the shareholders have more of a say in that, but it becomes his problem.
It certainly does. Or opportunity, Jason.
Yeah, sure. I feel like it's more of a problem.
Yeah.
It's some number of working Airbus airplanes. That's a big deal.
It's not nothing. Speaking of not currently working Airbus airplanes, Japan Airlines has a very specific subfleet of A350-1000 aircraft that it operates to premier destinations, including New York's JFK Airport,
the finest of premier global hub.
While Japan Airlines may take great care in its aircraft, a certain other airline's ground handler might not, because they were taxiing an A330 and they taxied that A330 right into the windshield of JAL's A350.
You shouldn't do that.
No.
But what's so notable here is that JAL's a bit short on airplanes right now. Well, they retired. Japanese airlines in general retired too many wide-body aircraft during COVID, as many airlines did. They're not unique in this form.
Mm-hmm.
But they also, as you mentioned, they have a very, very special subfleet of A350-1000 for premium destinations. I was on one last year, had a very not premium experience because the entertainment system was broken. That wasn't great. But rather than swapping in another aircraft, which may not have even been available, in the most Japanese way possible, they put out a press release brought to our attention by, again, John Walton. That guy everywhere right now. But they put out a press release detailing the operational impact of a single aircraft being out of service. I can tell you that a total number of 16 flights will be delayed with a maximum delay time of 15 hours and 55 minutes, because you don't want to elapse to 16 hours, affecting 3,144 passengers over the time span of December 19th to December 22nd, which interestingly is even still a few days from right now. But it's really interesting to see an airline be so forthcoming about here's what happened, down to like the exact time, the location, the aircraft registration, and the aircraft type that impacted them, and the damage done at JFK. I still don't know whose A330 that was, but I think this may have been during de-icing. We've had some weather here in New York recently, and our airports don't really handle weather well. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was as a result of de-icing. But they were just very forthright in saying, here's what happened, here's the impact. We don't have another aircraft to make up the delay, so here's how we're going to be delayed. And it really reminds me of how we've talked about North Atlantic in the past and other long-haul, low-cost airlines, where if they take a delay on the first day of the month, it's going to ripple all through the end of the month because there is no slack in the schedule and there are no other aircraft to pull around from the back warehouse and operate a flight. This is just something that they will have to figure out over time how to schedule around. And eventually, when the aircraft is repaired, things will go back to normal. But until then, there's no slack, no aircraft to pull around. There's no flights your options are either you cancel flights and strand people entirely, or you delay them 16 hours, 15 hours, 55 minutes or whatever. It's a tough call, but really highlights the shortage of aircraft airlines like JAL are facing.
Yeah, the wide body shortage is real. And to put a point on that, it's not just a lack of aircraft from an airline's perspective. It's a lack of aircraft from a manufacturer's perspective, because JAL's sitting around waiting for a bunch of A350s to enlarge its fleet.
And that might not even be because of Airbus, but the entire supply chain, as we've talked about so often, especially when you're talking about ultra premium aircraft like this that have just so many components and special things that are really only going on board this aircraft. It may not even be Airbus's fault, probably isn't, but that doesn't really help passengers at the end of the day. If your flight's delayed, and you don't really care why. But it is interesting to know why it's delayed. 15 hours,
15 hours and 55 minutes. Yes.
Yeah, the London flights in particular seem to be getting the worst of it.
At least they're precise.
Yeah, if nothing else, there is that.
Let's talk briefly about another preliminary report that came out. Very brief report on a Malta Air in-flight engine shutdown. This one, turns out, had absolutely nothing to do with the engine itself. The sun visor came detached from its position on the flight deck, struck the engine's start lever, and turned off the engine.
No, this reminds me of that time, what was it, on a Delta A350 that the pilot spilled coffee and it shorted out the engine fuel cutoff switches, I believe, and actually turned off the engine. They
turned off the radios. Yeah.
Turned off a whole lot of stuff. It reminds me of that.
One of the engines. Happened more than once, too, yeah.
It did. It's a real problem, but that's crazy that I wonder how the sun visor fell. I guess after many, many years of use, a screw or bolt came loose and it fell, and man, it hit the worst of all the possible options on the console.
It should not. This aircraft is not that old, though.
Oh.
No, this is a 737 MAX 8-200.
Oh, so this has to be very, very new. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not great.
So the pilot stopped the climb and restarted the engine and then continued on.
That's one of those reports where the pilot's probably put in the logbook or whatever, like, man, you're not going to believe this. You're going to call me a liar, but I swear this is what happened. The sun visor.
This is how it happened.
The sun visor just all of a sudden broke off and turned off the engine all on its own.
There I was.
One in a million and one shot, Doc.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Okay. We've got some other news to kind of round out the episode. Jason, do you want to go to... No one wants to go to Dulles.
I don't want to go to Dulles.
Do we want to talk about Dulles first?
I just came from Dulles, and I didn't even get to fly home because my flight was delayed, because of course it was. But we just talked about an incident where an engine was turned off because of not the engine's fault. But then there's a United 777 at Dulles, which had some sort of failure and set the airport on fire.
Oops.
Yeah, that happens.
Not the airport itself. We should specify.
Not the terminal, but there's a lot of nothing around Dulles. Whatever the engine spewed out, and by the way, the flight was fine. They dumped fuel quite at a low altitude, by the way, because I saw some video on that. This was a flight from UA 803 from Dulles to Tokyo, Haneda. How old was this 777? It's a pretty old 777. No, they're all old at United.
But, I mean,
it's just how old was this aircraft? Let's see. N78004 is 22.7 years old. This is not a young aircraft.
78004?
Yep. 27.2 years old aircraft. Yeah, it spewed some parts out of the engine apparently and set some of the grass outside of the airport on fire, which is not great, but the aircraft returned, and it was... I had actually read, this was an interesting twist about the handling of the situation, that United actually closed a United club at Dulles to shuffle all its passengers in there to rebook everyone and deal with that delay, which I think I've never heard of an airline doing before. And I think that's quite an interesting...
That's a very interesting way to do it.
Interesting twist on a otherwise pretty mundane story.
It's worth noting, as regular listeners of this podcast will no doubt be attempting to rack their brains about, I've heard of previous United Airlines engine issues on their 777s. This is a former Continental Airlines GE-powered 777. So while it may be an engine issue, it's not related to any of the Pratt engine issues that United has previously experienced.
No, and those aircraft, there are rumors that those Pratt-powered aircraft, those are being quietly parked or withdrawn.
Pushed into the ocean?
Yeah, or just vaporized from existence because they're all sorts of problematic.
From existence.
But yeah, these are the GE-powered aircraft. It doesn't mean they're getting any younger, because they are certainly not getting any younger. But this is another case.
No, just
of United needing new aircraft that they're just Boeing is years late getting to them. They're catching up, but I guess it's also good to remember that they have other aircraft that are older than this 777. They're all of their 767s, pretty much. U.S. Airlines really needs some new airplanes.
Ain't that the truth? Speaking of new airplanes, sort of, kind of, Austrian Airlines is getting rid of its Embraer fleet, sort of, because it's going to move that fleet to Air Dolomiti.
That's exciting.
This is interesting for a few reasons. One, all of the aircraft will be transferred out and get a new livery, which is fine, whatever. But two, it marks the first time that Lufthansa has shown restraint and not just started a new airline.
Not yet. Not yet.
Whenever this actually goes through, we could be seeing Air Dolomiti Regional or Air Dolomiti City.
Ooh, City Airlines operated by Air Dolomiti on behalf of Austrian Airlines, marketed by Lufthansa, code share with United. That could be a real thing.
And all of that's going to be operated by an Air Baltic A220.
Oh, that's how you bring it all together. But there seems to be, we probably should have talked about this earlier, but there seems to be some sort of fleet rationalization plan coming to Lufthansa. And this is step one, shuffling around.
Well, we did talk about this early. We talked about this when we talked about the Lufthansa investor deck that came out. And we talked about mostly we talked about the wide body fleet rationalization. But it does seem to be that somebody sat down at Lufthansa and said, maybe it would make sense to have regional airlines, mid-haul airlines, and long-haul airlines. So that seems to be what's at play here.
There's definitely a German word for that.
I'm sure there is. And I'm sure if someone knows it, they can email us at podcast@fr24.com and let us know. Let's close the show with an interesting new route from Oman Air. They are launching a few new flights, some to Saudi Arabia. They're launching a flight to Russia, but they're also launching a flight to Copenhagen via Baghdad.
So you had me at the Copenhagen part. That's no big deal. But via where?
Baghdad.
Oh, sure. And surely this must be like we operate to Baghdad and then offload all the passengers and then only have local No, you can actually fly on the same aircraft in one hop on one ticket from Oman to Copenhagen via Baghdad.
Why not?
Sure.
Why not?
Look closely at your tickets when you book, but wow,
that'd be fun.
Gotta be up there for one of the year's most unexpected route launches.
I, for one, would want to take that flight. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you do go to the Nordics every so often. I believe you just got back. So maybe next year you can do it via Oman.
I'll do a round the world flight.
Now that's good content.
And pick that particular eastbound routing. Speaking of interesting routings, we have one more flight to talk about, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Santa.
You can't book that flight.
You can't book that flight, but it will possibly be making a stopover at your airport or perhaps your house. We will once again absolutely be tracking Santa on Flight Radar 24 this year. Look for Santa to begin warming up the reindeer and his sleigh on the 23rd of December ahead of the Christmas Eve present run extravaganza.
All right. Let's just hope he doesn't go to JFK and get clipped by an A330.
It's always my grave concern that Santa will be taken out by a de-icing truck. But I'm hopeful that that won't happen this year. So look for that on flightradar24.com, in the Flight Radar 24 mobile apps, and wherever fine Santas are found. And with that, we close what is the final new episode of 2025. We made it to the end of the episode. We made it to the end of the year. And I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to everyone who has made it this far with us. It's been quite the year for aviation. And unfortunately, I don't really mean that in a good way. It's been a really rough year for a lot of the industry, really going back to last Christmas. And unfortunately, things did not let up throughout the year. But
there's been some good stuff.
There's been some bright spots.
There has been. I'm just scrolling back to our episode. You went to Oshkosh. That's fun.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. No, I'm not trying to sound down, generally speaking. But what I was going to say is I think that we have covered it well and hopefully provided what our listeners come to expect and deserve as far as some no-nonsense explanations of what's happening in the industry. And we'll continue to do that in the new year. This will be our last new episode for the year. We will be off next week. And then to start the year, we'll have a look back at a few of the more interesting conversations that we had with our guests in 2025. And then we'll start
2025. That's right. You got to check that.
I'm still writing 1935 on all my checks. And then the second week.
Are you a DC-3?
Yes, I am a DC-3. You figured me out. And then we'll get into the first new episode of 2026 will come out on the 9th of January. So look forward to that. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, email us at podcast@fr24.com. We are always around. And with that, we say thank you so very much. And I am Ian Petchnick, here, as always, with
Listener Benowitz. Thanks for listening.